The unstoppable warrior. The battlefield was chaos. Explosions lit up the dark sky as Earth's last fleet clashed with the mighty Drakari armada. Captain Ryan stood at the edge of his command deck, watching the carnage unfold. He was no stranger to war, but this battle felt different. It was the final stand for humanity, and everything depended on him. "Captain," his first officer, Lieutenant Mara, called out. "The enemy flagship is charging its main cannon. We don't have much time." Ryan clenched his fists. The Drakari leader, Saldrak, was known for his cruelty and brilliance. He had outsmarted Earth's forces time and time again. But this time, Ryan had a plan. A risky, almost suicidal plan. "Prepare the boarding pod," Ryan ordered, his voice calm but firm. Mara's eyes widened. "You're not seriously thinking of—" "I am," Ryan interrupted. "The only way to end this war is to cut off the head of the snake. If I take down Saldrak, the Drakari forces will fall into disarray." Mara hesitated but nodded. "Yes, Captain. I'll ready the team." "No team," Ryan said, locking eyes with her. "This is something I have to do alone." Within minutes, Ryan was strapped into a small boarding pod, hurtling through space toward the Drakari flagship. The enemy ship loomed like a black beast, bristling with weapons and shields. Alarms blared as the pod pierced its defenses and crashed into a maintenance bay. Ryan stepped out, his plasma blade humming in his hand. The ship's interior was dark and cold, a labyrinth of metal corridors. He moved quickly but cautiously, his every sense on high alert. Drakari soldiers appeared, their sharp armor glinting under the dim lights. They attacked without hesitation, but Ryan was faster. His blade danced through the air, cutting down one enemy after another. Years of training and countless battles had made him a force to be reckoned with. Finally, he reached the command chamber. The doors slid open to reveal Saldrak, the towering Drakari leader. He was a menacing figure, his four glowing eyes fixed on Ryan. In one hand, he held a massive energy spear, and in the other, a shield that seemed to pulse with power. "So the human hero comes to die," Saldrak said, his deep voice echoing through the chamber. "Not today," Ryan replied, stepping forward. The duel began with a thunderous clash. Saldrak was fast and strong, his spear striking with the force of a storm. But Ryan was determined. He dodged, parried, and countered with precision, using every ounce of his skill to stay in the fight. The battle raged on, each strike shaking the room. Sparks flew as their weapons collided. Ryan could feel his body tiring, but he refused to give up. He thought of Earth, of the billions of lives depending on him. Failure was not an option. "You fight well, human," Saldrak said, his tone almost respectful. "But you cannot defeat me. I am a god among my people." "Then it's time for a god to fall," Ryan shot back. With a sudden burst of energy, Ryan lunged forward. His blade found a gap in Saldrak's armor, piercing through. The Drakari leader let out a roar of pain, his spear falling from his grasp. Ryan stepped back, breathing heavily as Saldrak collapsed to the ground. The room fell silent, the hum of the ship's systems the only sound. "You may have won the battle," Saldrak said, his voice weak but defiant. "But you do not understand what you have done. By defeating me, you have inherited my place and my burden." "What are you talking about?" Ryan demanded. Saldrak's eyes dimmed as he spoke his final words. "By our law, the victor takes all that I leave behind. My power, my responsibilities, and my wives." Before Ryan could respond, Saldrak's body went still. The chamber seemed to grow colder, and an eerie silence settled over the ship. Ryan stared down at the fallen leader, confusion and unease creeping into his mind. What had Saldrak meant? Wives? Burden? None of it made sense. "Captain Ryan," Mara's voice crackled through his comm. "The enemy forces are retreating. You did it." Ryan turned away from Saldrak's body, his mind racing. He had won the fight, But it was clear that his journey was far from over. As he made his way back to the pod, a single thought lingered in his mind. What had he truly inherited by defeating the Drakari leader? The war was over, but a new challenge was just beginning. The law of the Drakari. The victory celebrations on Earth were short-lived. Captain Ryan barely had time to catch his breath before an unexpected message arrived. It wasn't from Earth's allies or any known human outpost. It was from the Drakari High Council. The holographic transmission flickered to life in the command room of Ryan's ship, Erebus. The council members appeared as towering, stern figures with shimmering robes and glowing blue eyes. Their presence commanded attention, and the room fell silent. Captain Ryan, the lead counselor, began, his voice deep and resonating. You have done what no other has accomplished. You defeated Saldrak, leader of the Drakari Empire. By our sacred laws, you are now bound to the consequences of your victory. Ryan leaned forward, frowning. What consequences? The war is over. Isn't that enough? The counselor's expression remained grave. Saldrak was not just a leader. He was a symbol, a protector, and the holder of our most ancient traditions. By defeating him, you have taken on his mantle. His responsibilities are now yours. Ryan's patience was wearing thin. Enough with the riddles. Just tell me what you want. Another counselor stepped forward. Her voice was softer but no less firm. You must honor the Pact of Union. Zaldrak's 3 bonded wives are now under your protection. Refusal to accept this duty will be seen as an act of dishonor and an act of war. The room erupted into murmurs among Ryan's crew. Mara, standing beside him, whispered, "This has to be a joke, right? Some sort of alien custom we can ignore." Ryan raised a hand to silence her, his gaze fixed on the council. "You can't seriously expect me to." The lead counselor interrupted. "This is no trivial matter, Captain. The law is clear. Saldrak's wives are not ordinary beings. They hold power and knowledge vital to the balance of our empire. By accepting them, you ensure peace between our people. By refusing, you risk everything." Ryan's jaw tightened. "And if I agree, what happens next?" The counselor's glowing eyes seemed to pierce through him. "They will be sent to you immediately. From that moment on, their welfare and loyalty will be your responsibility. We advise caution, Captain. The Drakari widows are not easily tamed." Hours later, back on the Erebus, Ryan sat in his quarters, replaying the conversation in his mind. The idea of taking responsibility for 3 alien widows sounded absurd. Yet the consequences of refusal were clear: war, chaos, and the possible destruction of Earth. A chime echoed through the ship, signaling an incoming transmission. Mara's voice came over the comm. "Captain, the Drakari transport ship has arrived. They're requesting permission to dock." Ryan sighed, rubbing his temples. "Granted. I'll meet them in the main hangar." As the transport ship docked, the atmosphere on the Erebus grew tense. Ryan's crew gathered near the hangar, whispering among themselves. No one knew what to expect, least of all Ryan. The transport doors hissed open, and 3 figures emerged. The first was Kyra, tall and elegant with a commanding presence. Her sharp violet eyes scanned the room like a predator sizing up its prey. She wore a flowing black robe adorned with intricate patterns, and her every movement exuded confidence. The second was Kadra, smaller in stature, but no less intimidating. Her silvery hair shimmered under the hangar lights, and her piercing gaze seemed to look straight through people. She carried a mysterious air, as if she knew secrets no one else could comprehend. The last was Marava, the youngest and seemingly the most approachable. Her golden skin glowed faintly, and her expression was calm, almost kind. But Ryan could sense there was more to her than met the eye. As they approached, Syra stepped forward, addressing Ryan directly. "So, you are the human who killed my husband. Interesting." Ryan squared his shoulders, meeting her gaze. "I didn't do it for glory or power. I did it to save my people." Zyra smirked. "Noble words, But now you carry his legacy, whether you want it or not. Kedra spoke next, her voice sharp and icy. Do you even understand the weight of what you've taken on? You've inherited more than just a title. You've stepped into a web of alliances, enemies, and secrets that could destroy you. Mirava remained silent, her golden eyes studying Ryan carefully. Finally, she spoke, her tone soft but firm. You saved Earth, Captain. Now you must decide if you can save yourself. As the widows settled into the ship, tensions grew. Each of them had their own way of asserting control. Zyra began questioning Ryan's leadership decisions. Kedra prowled the ship with a cold detachment, and Mirava quietly observed everything, as if waiting for the right moment to act. Meanwhile, strange things started happening aboard the Erebus. Systems malfunctioned without explanation, and several crew members reported seeing shadowy figures in the corridors. Ryan's instincts told him it wasn't a coincidence. One night, as Ryan reviewed the ship's security logs, Zyra appeared in his quarters unannounced. "You're in danger, Captain," she said bluntly. Ryan frowned. What kind of danger? Zyra's expression turned serious. By killing Zaldrak, you disrupted a delicate balance of power. There are those within the Drakari who see you as a threat. They won't stop until you're eliminated. Before Ryan could respond, the ship's alarms blared. Mara's voice came over the comm. "Captain, we have an unidentified vessel approaching at high speed." Ryan grabbed his weapon, his heart pounding. He knew one thing for certain. This was just the beginning of a much larger fight. The hidden agenda. The Erebus cruised through the silent void of space, but its crew was anything but calm. Ever since Captain Ryan had inherited Zaldrak's 3 widows, the ship had been in a state of constant unease. Strange malfunctions plagued the systems, and the alien women, each more mysterious than the last, seemed to have their own hidden motives. Ryan stood on the bridge, his arms crossed, staring out into the abyss. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had stepped into a trap far larger than he could understand. The widows weren't just passengers. They were puzzle pieces in a game he hadn't agreed to play. "Captain," Mara said, breaking his thoughts. "Another power fluctuation in the lower decks. That's the 5th one this week." Ryan frowned. "Send a team to investigate. I want answers this time, not guesses." Mara hesitated. "About that, the crew is nervous. They think it's connected to the widows. Some say they've seen things. Shadows moving where there shouldn't be any. Whispers in empty corridors." Ryan sighed. He had heard the rumors too. "I'll handle it myself," he said, striding toward the lift. The lower decks were dark and eerily quiet. Ryan carried a flashlight and his plasma sidearm, the faint hum of the weapon reassuring him. As he moved through the narrow halls, he couldn't help but notice the strange energy in the air. It was as if the ship itself was holding its breath. He turned a corner and stopped. Standing in the middle of the corridor was Kedra, the silver-haired widow. Her eyes glowed faintly, and her expression was unreadable. "What are you doing down here?" Ryan asked, his tone sharp. Kedra tilted her head, her voice as cold as the metal walls around them. "Shouldn't I be asking you the same question, Captain? After all, this is my territory now." Ryan narrowed his eyes. "Your territory. This is my ship." Kedra took a step closer, her presence almost suffocating. "Is it? Because from where I stand, you've already lost control." Before Ryan could respond, the lights flickered, and a deep, guttural sound echoed through the corridor. It wasn't mechanical, it was alive. Kedra's lips curled into a faint smile. "They're here," she said cryptically. "Who's here?" Ryan demanded, gripping his weapon. Kedra didn't answer. Instead, she disappeared into the shadows, leaving Ryan alone with the unsettling sound growing louder. Back on the bridge, chaos erupted as the ship's sensors detected an approaching vessel. Mara called out, "Captain, we've got an unidentified ship on our scanners. It's not broadcasting any signal." Ryan returned to the bridge, his expression grim. "Can we hail them?" Mara shook her head. No response. And, Captain, it's cloaked. We can't get a full visual. The widows appeared on the bridge moments later. Thyra strode in like she owned the place, her violet eyes sharp. It's not a ship, she said. It's a predator. What are you talking about? Ryan asked, frustration creeping into his voice. Thyra turned to him, her gaze piercing. The Drakari Empire isn't as unified as you think. Zaldrak's death has created a power vacuum, and you've inherited his enemies along with his wives. That ship belongs to the Shadow Brood, a faction that believes you're unworthy of your new role. Why didn't you tell me this sooner? Ryan snapped. You never asked. Thyra replied coolly. The ship's alarms blared as the unidentified vessel fired a warning shot, shaking the Erebus. Ryan gritted his teeth. Shields up. Prepare for evasive maneuvers. Kedra's voice came from behind him. Running won't help. They've already marked you. Ryan spun around, anger flaring. Then what do you suggest? Let them destroy us. Kedra's lips curled into a smirk. No, Captain. I suggest you start acting like the warrior who killed Zaldrak. Fight back. The next hours were a tense game of cat and mouse. The Shadow Brood ship darted in and out of the Erebus's sensor range, testing its defenses. The crew worked tirelessly, their nerves fraying with each passing minute. Ryan found himself relying on the widows more than he wanted to admit. Thyra's strategic mind proved invaluable, helping him predict the enemy's moves. Kedra's cryptic knowledge of the Shadow Brood provided insights no human could have known. And Marava, the quietest of the three, seemed to have an uncanny ability to calm the panicked crew. But Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that they were withholding something critical. In the middle of the chaos, a breakthrough came. One of the engineers discovered a hidden message embedded in the ship's logs, a leftover from Zaldrak's time. The message was fragmented but clear enough to send chills down Ryan's spine. Beware the Voidcaller. Its reach extends beyond the stars. Trust no one, not even those who stand beside you. Ryan stared at the message, his mind racing. He had thought defeating Zaldrak was the end of his struggles, but now it seemed like it was only the beginning. The widows knew something. They had to. And if they weren't going to tell him willingly, he would find a way to uncover the truth. As the Shadow Brood ship launched its final assault, Ryan stood on the bridge, his resolve hardening. Prepare for combat, he ordered. If they want a fight, we'll give them one. But in the back of his mind, he knew this was only the first of many battles to come. Whatever Zaldrak had been guarding, whatever the Voidcaller was, it was coming for him, and he wasn't sure if he or his crew would survive what lay ahead. A dangerous alliance. The Erebus drifted in the aftermath of its latest skirmish with the Shadow Brood. The once pristine corridors of the ship were now scarred with scorch marks, and the crew moved with a collective weariness. Yet the sense of relief from surviving the attack was fleeting. Captain Ryan knew this was no victory. It was a warning. In the dim glow of the war room, Ryan stood over the holographic table, staring at a map of the galaxy. His senior officers surrounded him, their faces grim. Mara broke the silence. Captain, we can't keep this up. The Shadow Brood won't stop, and they're getting smarter. If we don't find a way to deal with them, it's only a matter of time before they overwhelm us. Ryan's jaw tightened. I know, but the Shadow Brood isn't the real problem. He gestured to the fragmented message they had recovered from Zaldrak's archives. Beware the Voidcaller. The Voidcaller, Ryan said, his voice low, is the real threat. And whatever it is, it's coming for us. Thyra, the eldest of Zaldrak's widows, stepped forward from the shadows. Her violet eyes gleamed with an intensity that silenced the room. You're right, Captain. The Voidcaller is a force beyond your understanding. It's not just a threat to you, it's a threat to the entire galaxy. Mara bristled. And you're just now deciding to tell us this. Thyra ignored her, focusing on Ryan. Zaldrak didn't die because of you, Captain. He died because of it. The Void Caller has been manipulating events for centuries, quietly eliminating anyone who could oppose it. Zaldrak was one of the few who dared to stand against it, and now that task falls to you. Ryan's eyes narrowed. If you knew this all along, why didn't you warn me? Why let me walk into this blind? Zyra's expression hardened. Because I needed to see if you were worthy. The Void Caller isn't something you can face with brute force alone. You need allies, strong ones, and whether you like it or not, that includes us. The war room fell into a tense silence. The three widows stood together, an unbreakable triad of mystery and power. Kadra, the silver-haired widow, stepped forward next, her tone colder than space itself. The Void Caller is an ancient entity, Kadra began. It consumes galaxies, leaving nothing but silence in its wake. Zaldrak believed he could stop it, but he underestimated its reach. The Shadow Brood is just one of its many tools, designed to sow chaos and division. Mirava, the youngest and quietest of the widows, finally spoke. Her voice was soft but steady, carrying a weight that drew everyone's attention. There is a weapon, Captain. A weapon powerful enough to destroy the Void Caller. But it's incomplete. Zaldrak spent decades trying to unlock its secrets. Now, it's up to you. Ryan folded his arms. And where is this weapon? Mirava hesitated, glancing at Zyra and Kadra before answering. Scattered. Its pieces were hidden across the galaxy to keep them out of the Void Caller's grasp. Finding them will be dangerous. The tension in the room was palpable. Ryan leaned over the table, his hands gripping its edges. Let me get this straight. You want me to go on some galaxy-wide scavenger hunt for pieces of a weapon that might not even work, all while being hunted by the Shadow Brood, and who knows what else? Zyra smirked. That's the gist of it. Yes. Ryan glared at her. And what's in it for you? Kadra's eyes gleamed. Survival, Captain. If the Void Caller wins, there won't be a galaxy left for us to rule. Our goals align. For now. Ryan didn't trust them, not entirely. But he couldn't deny the truth in their words. The fragmented warning from Zaldrak's archives, the relentless attacks from the Shadow Brood, the eerie silence of distant colonies. It all pointed to something far bigger than himself. All right, Ryan said finally. We find the pieces of this weapon. But make no mistake, if any of you step out of line, you'll answer to me. Zyra gave a small, mocking bow. As you wish, Captain. The first lead came sooner than expected. Mirava, using her knowledge of Zaldrak's hidden networks, identified an ancient Drakari outpost on a remote, uncharted moon. According to the records, it housed one of the weapon's components. The journey to the moon was fraught with tension. The crew was uneasy with the widow's presence, and Ryan himself couldn't shake the feeling that they were leading him into a trap. But there was no turning back. As the Erebus approached the moon, the sensors picked up strange readings. The surface was dotted with massive, glowing structures, their purpose unknown. Mara frowned as she analyzed the data. Captain, this moon isn't natural. Those structures, they're alive. Or something close to it. Ryan glanced at Zyra, who stood calmly at his side. What aren't you telling me? Zyra shrugged. The Void Caller's influence reaches farther than you think. This moon is one of its way stations, a place where it gathers energy and prepares for its next assault. If you want the weapon's component, you'll have to take it from its grasp. The landing party consisted of Ryan, the widows, and a small team of his most trusted soldiers. The surface of the moon was eerie, its glowing structures pulsing like the heartbeat of some ancient beast. As they ventured deeper into the alien landscape, the air grew heavy with tension. The structures seemed to react to their presence, glowing brighter with each step. And then the ground trembled. Out of the shadows emerged creatures unlike anything Ryan had ever seen. Twisted amalgamations of metal and flesh, their forms both alien and horrifying. The widows immediately sprang into action, their movements graceful and deadly. Ryan fought alongside them, his blade cutting through the creatures with precision. But for every one they destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. "This isn't a battle we can win," Kadra shouted. "We need to find the component and get out of here." Ryan nodded, his jaw set. "Then lead the way." As they pushed forward, the structures themselves began to shift, as if the moon was alive and trying to swallow them whole. Ryan's mind raced. If this was only the beginning, what horrors awaited them in the depths of the galaxy? Betrayal in the shadows. The Erebus drifted in silence, orbiting the eerie, glowing moon where the first piece of the weapon had been recovered. The crew's relief at escaping the moon's horrors was short-lived. Something wasn't right on the ship. Whispers filled the halls, and tension between the widows, the crew, and even Ryan himself grew thicker with each passing hour. Ryan sat in his quarters, the weapon fragment they'd retrieved resting on his desk. It was a strange, crystalline object that pulsed faintly with a rhythmic light, almost like it was alive. He didn't trust it, or the widows who claimed it was the key to stopping the Void Caller. His comm buzzed, breaking his thoughts. It was Mara. "Captain, we got another systems failure. This time, it's in the reactor bay. And, sir, there's something else." "What is it?" Ryan asked, already on his feet. "There's a rumor going around the crew," Mara said hesitantly. "They think there's a traitor on board." Ryan's jaw tightened. "I'll handle it. Meet me at the reactor bay." The reactor bay was dark, the hum of the ship's core filling the air. Ryan and Mara arrived to find the engineering team in disarray. Panels had been ripped open, wires dangled loose, and scorch marks marred the walls. "What happened here?" Ryan demanded. One of the engineers stepped forward, shaking slightly. "Sabotage, sir. Someone deliberately overloaded the plasma conduits. We caught it just in time, but if it had gone any further..." Ryan didn't need him to finish. A plasma overload would have destroyed the ship. "Run diagnostics on every system," he ordered. "I want to know exactly what was tampered with." Mara leaned in closer. "Captain, if this was sabotage, we need to find the culprit fast. If there's a traitor on board..." Ryan nodded grimly. "I know, and I have a feeling I know where to start." The widows were gathered in the observation lounge when Ryan found them. Thyra sat with her usual air of authority. Kadra leaned casually against the wall, and Marava stood by the window, gazing out at the stars. "You've been busy," Ryan said, stepping into the room. Thyra raised an eyebrow. "Have we?" "Don't play coy," Ryan snapped. "The reactor was sabotage, and I'm not about to believe it was a coincidence. One of you knows something." Kedra smirked. "Accusing us without proof. How very human of you." Ryan stepped closer to her, his eyes narrowing. "If I find out you're behind this, you'll what?" Kedra interrupted, her tone icy. "Throw me in the brig. Airlock me? Let me remind you, Captain, that you need us. Without our knowledge, you're nothing but a blind man stumbling through a war you don't understand." "Enough," Kazira said, her voice cutting through the tension. She stood and faced Ryan. "If there's sabotage on this ship, we have nothing to do with it. But you're right about one thing. There's a traitor among us. And it's not just a threat to you. It's a threat to all of us." As Ryan left the observation lounge, doubt clouded his mind. The widows were manipulative, yes, but they hadn't lied to him so far. Not directly, at least. If they weren't responsible, then who was? Later that night, his suspicions deepened. While reviewing the ship's logs, he noticed anomalies. Doors opening and closing in restricted areas, security cameras going offline at odd intervals. The sabotage was precise, and whoever was behind it knew the ship's systems inside and out. But the most alarming discovery was a pattern. Every incident occurred shortly after Kedra had been seen in the area. The next day, Ryan called a meeting with his senior officers and the widows. The tension in the room was palpable. "We have a saboteur on board," Ryan began, his voice firm. "And based on the evidence, Kedra is our prime suspect." Kedra's silver eyes flashed with anger. "You're accusing me? How convenient." "The logs don't lie," Ryan said, pulling up the data on the holographic table. "Every incident traces back to areas you've accessed. Care to explain?" Kedra crossed her arms, her expression cold. "Perhaps your logs have been tampered with, or perhaps you're too blind to see the real enemy in your midst." Zara stepped in, her tone sharp. "Enough, Kedra. This isn't the time for your games." She turned to Ryan. "Kedra may be reckless, but she's no saboteur. If she wanted to destroy this ship, she'd do it openly." Ryan wasn't convinced. "Then who? If it's not her, who else has the knowledge and the access to pull this off?" Before anyone could answer, the ship's alarms blared. Mara's voice came over the comm. "Captain, we've got incoming. It's the Shadow Brood." The Erebus shuddered as the Shadow Brood ship attacked, its weapons striking with brutal precision. Ryan raced to the bridge, the widows close behind him. "Shields at 60%, Mara shouted. "They're targeting our engines." "Return fire," Ryan ordered. The battle was chaotic, the Erebus struggling to hold its own against the more agile Shadow Brood ship. But something didn't add up. The Shadow Brood's attacks were too coordinated, too focused. It was as if they knew exactly where to hit. Then it hit Ryan. The saboteur wasn't just trying to cripple the Erebus. They were feeding information to the enemy. As the battle raged, Ryan confronted Kedra in the heat of the moment. "You've been working with them, haven't you? That's why they're always one step ahead." Kedra glared at him, her voice cutting through the chaos. "You think I'd ally myself with the Voidkeller's pawns? Don't insult me." Before Ryan could press further, Mirava stepped between them. "Stop," she shouted. "This isn't helping. If we don't focus, we'll all die." Mirava's words snapped Ryan back to the moment. He issued rapid-fire orders, using every ounce of his strategic mind to turn the tide. The Erebus managed to outmaneuver the Shadow Brood ship, delivering a final devastating blow that sent it spiraling into the void. After the battle, the truth finally came to light. The real saboteur was uncovered, one of the Erebus's own crew members, who had been secretly working for the Shadow Brood. The traitor admitted to leaking information in exchange for promises of power and survival. But Ryan's trust in the widows was shaken further. Even though they weren't directly involved, their cryptic behavior and Kedra's defiance made it clear they had their own agendas. As the Erebus limped away from the battle, Ryan knew one thing for certain. The war against the Voidkeller wasn't just about weapons and battles. It was about trust, and he couldn't afford to trust anyone completely. The rise of the Protector. The Erebus limped through space, its hull scarred from the recent battle with the Shadow Brood. The crew worked tirelessly to repair the damage, but Ryan knew the ship was only part of the problem. The enemy wasn't just outside the ship, it was within. Trust among the crew was fractured, and the uneasy alliance with the widows felt like walking a razor's edge. Ryan stood in the war room, staring at the weapon fragment they had retrieved from the glowing moon. The crystalline structure pulsed faintly, as though it were alive, its rhythm matching the pounding of his thoughts. The widows had said this was only one piece of the weapon, but it held no answers, only more questions. Mara entered, her face pale. "Captain, the crew is restless. Morale's low, and after the sabotage, no one knows who to trust. Some are even questioning your decisions." Ryan's jaw tightened. "Let them. I didn't take this command to win a popularity contest. I took it to survive." Mara hesitated, then said, "The widows. Do you really believe they're on our side?" Ryan didn't answer immediately. He looked at the fragment, its faint glow reflected in his eyes. "I don't know, Mara. But right now, they're the only ones who know how to stop what's coming." The widows waited for him in the observation lounge, their figures silhouetted against the vastness of space. Hajira, as always, radiated authority, while Kedra stood with arms crossed, her silver eyes filled with defiance. Mirava, the quietest of the three, gazed out at the stars, her expression unreadable. "You've been quiet since the battle," Zyra said, her tone almost amused. "I take it you're finally starting to understand the weight of your new role." Ryan ignored her sarcasm. "The crew is falling apart, and we're running out of time. If you know something about this weapon, how to use it, where to find the other pieces, I need you to tell me. Now." Kedra smirked. "Demanding, isn't he?" Zyra raised a hand to silence her. "Very well, Captain. You've proven yourself capable, if not entirely trustworthy. The second piece of the weapon is on a planet called Valthera, deep within the exiled sector." Ryan frowned. "The exiled sector? That's a no-fly zone. Even the Drakari avoid it." "For good reason," Mirava said softly, her golden eyes meeting his for the first time. "The Void Caller's influence is strongest there. It's a graveyard of worlds consumed by its power. If we go, there's no guarantee we'll make it back." Ryan's determination didn't waver. "Then we'll just have to make sure we do." The journey to Valthera was fraught with tension. The exiled sector was a dark corner of the galaxy, its stars dim and its space littered with the debris of forgotten civilizations. The crew whispered of ghosts and curses, and even Ryan felt the oppressive weight of the sector's reputation. As the Erebus approached Valthera, the ship's sensors began to malfunction. Mara reported strange readings, fluctuations in gravity, energy signatures that defied explanation. "This place doesn't feel right," Mara said, her voice uneasy. "It's not," Kedra said from the back of the bridge. "Valthera is a nexus, a place where the boundaries between realities are thin. The Void Caller uses it as a feeding ground." The planet itself came into view, a massive, swirling mass of black and violet, its surface covered in jagged, crystalline spires. Lightning arced across its atmosphere, casting eerie shadows over its surface. "What exactly are we looking for down there?" Ryan asked. Zyra stepped forward. "The second fragment of the weapon is hidden within the heart of the planet, but reaching it will be difficult." Kedra snorted, understatement of the century. The landing party consisted of Ryan, the widows, and a small group of his best soldiers. The moment they set foot on Valthera, the air felt heavy, as if the planet itself were alive and watching them. The landscape was alien and surreal. The crystalline spires pulsed with an inner light, and the ground beneath their feet seemed to shift and ripple. "Stay close," Ryan ordered. They moved cautiously, the widows leading the way. Zyra seemed to know exactly where to go, her confidence unwavering. Mirava walked beside Ryan, her gaze darting around as if she could sense something the others couldn't. "It's here," she whispered after a while. "What's here?" Ryan asked. Before she could answer, the ground erupted. Creatures burst forth, nightmarish beings of shadow and crystal, their forms twisting and writhing unnaturally. "Void spawn!" Zyra shouted. "Protect the captain." The battle was chaotic. The void spawn moved with unnatural speed, their attacks unpredictable. Ryan fought with everything he had, his plasma blade cutting through the creatures, but for every one he destroyed, another seemed to take its place. Kedra unleashed bursts of energy from her hands, while Zyra wielded a weapon that seemed to appear from thin air. Mirava, though unarmed, moved with a grace that defied logic, evading attacks and drawing the creature's attention away from Ryan. "Keep moving," Ryan shouted. They pushed forward, finally reaching the entrance to a massive cavern at the base of a towering spire. Inside, the air was even heavier, thick with an unnatural energy that made it hard to breathe. At the center of the cavern, bathed in an eerie violet light, was the second fragment of the weapon. It was larger than the first, its crystalline structure pulsing with a rhythm that seemed to match the beating of Ryan's heart. As Ryan reached for it, Zyra stopped him. "Wait, it's not that simple. The Void Caller won't let us take it without a fight." The ground shook, and a massive shadow loomed over them. A creature emerged from the darkness, larger and more terrifying than anything they had faced before. Its form was an ever-shifting mass of crystal and shadow, and its roar shook the cavern. "This is why Xaldrak failed," Xayra said, her voice steady. "He wasn't strong enough to face this. But you must be." Ryan gripped his weapon, his eyes fixed on the monstrous entity. "Then let's finish what he started. Humanity's last stand." The cavern rumbled as the monstrous guardian of the Void Caller stepped forward, its form a horrifying amalgamation of shadow and crystal. Each movement sent tremors through the ground, and its glowing eyes burned with an intelligence that felt ancient and malevolent. Captain Ryan gripped his plasma blade, his mind racing. This wasn't just another fight. It was the test of his worth, the moment that would decide whether humanity had a future or would be consumed by the Void Caller's reach. Behind him, Xayra, Kedra, and Marava took their positions. The widows, each with their unique powers, were as unpredictable as the enemy before them. Yet in this moment, they shared a singular goal: survival. "Stay focused," Xayra commanded. "This thing isn't just brute force. It's a piece of the Void Caller itself. Every move it makes is calculated to destroy us." "And what's your brilliant strategy?" Ryan shot back, his tone laced with frustration. "Don't die," Kedra said with a smirk, her hands glowing, as energy began to swirl around her. The creature roared, a sound that reverberated through the cavern and made the walls tremble. Without warning, it lunged, its massive crystalline limbs striking with terrifying speed. The battle was chaos. Ryan darted between the monster's strikes, his plasma blade cutting through the smaller tendrils that lashed out at him. The widows fought alongside him, their movements synchronized despite their differences. Kedra hurled bursts of energy, shattering parts of the creature's crystalline form. Xayra moved with deadly precision, her conjured weapon slicing through its shadowy limbs. Marava, though seemingly defenseless, used her agility to distract the beast, drawing its attacks away from Ryan. But the creature was relentless. For every piece they destroyed, it regenerated, growing stronger with each strike. "We're not making a dent." Mara's voice crackled over the comms from the Erebus, monitoring the battle from orbit. "Captain, it's drawing energy from the planet itself." Ryan's mind raced. If the creature was connected to the planet, destroying it might destabilize everything. But what choice did they have? "Focus on the core," Tyra shouted, pointing to a pulsing light at the creature's center. "That's its anchor to this realm." Ryan nodded, his determination hardening. He signaled the widows, and together they launched a coordinated attack. Kedra unleashed a massive burst of energy, momentarily stunning the creature. Xayra and Marava moved to its flanks, distracting it while Ryan charged straight for the core. The ground beneath him cracked and shifted as the creature retaliated, sending crystalline shards flying in every direction. One struck Ryan's armor, knocking him to the ground. He groaned, struggling to rise, but the creature loomed over him, its massive limb poised to strike. Then, out of nowhere, Marava appeared, placing herself between Ryan and the monster. She raised her arms, and a golden light erupted from her, forming a shield that deflected the attack. "Get up, Captain," she yelled, her voice filled with urgency. "This isn't the time to falter." Ryan pushed himself to his feet, his grip tightening on his blade. He charged again, this time with renewed focus. The fight reached its crescendo as Ryan plunged his blade into the creature's core. The cavern filled with a deafening roar as the light within the creature began to pulse wildly. "It's destabilizing," Xayra shouted. "We need to move." "No," Ryan barked. "Not yet. We have to finish this." The creature thrashed violently, its form breaking apart as the energy within it spiraled out of control. Kedra stepped forward, her silver eyes glowing with intensity. "We can channel the energy into the fragment," she said, gesturing to the crystalline weapon piece they had retrieved. "But it will take everything we have." Ryan hesitated, looking at the widows. "Are you sure?" Kedra smirked. "Not in the slightest. But do you have a better idea? Ryan nodded. Do it. The widows formed a circle around the fragment, their combined energies flowing into it. The crystal began to glow brighter, its rhythm syncing with the pulsating core of the creature. Ryan stood guard, fending off the creature's last desperate attacks. His body ached, his movements slowed, but he refused to give in. This was more than a battle for survival. It was a battle for hope. Finally, the fragment reached critical mass. A brilliant light erupted from it, engulfing the creature and the cavern in a blinding explosion. When the light faded, Ryan found himself on his knees, the silence around him deafening. The creature was gone, its essence completely obliterated. The cavern, now eerily still, seemed to hold its breath. The widows were slumped on the ground, their energy drained. Zyra managed a weak smile. Not bad for a human. Ryan chuckled, though his body screamed in protest. I'll take that as a compliment. Back on the Erebus, the crew celebrated their survival. But the victory felt bittersweet. The widows recovered slowly, their powers diminished from the effort. Ryan stood alone on the bridge, staring out at the stars. Mara approached, her expression cautious. We did it, Captain. But what now? Ryan didn't answer immediately. He thought of the warning they had uncovered, of the Void Calor's reach extending far beyond this battle. This isn't over, he said finally. We've got the second piece, but there's more out there. And the Void Calor won't stop until it's destroyed everything in its path. Mara nodded, her resolve matching his. Then we keep fighting. Ryan turned to face her, a faint smile on his lips. Damn right we do. As the Erebus prepared for its next journey, Ryan knew the road ahead would be harder than anything they had faced. But for the first time, he felt a glimmer of hope. Humanity's fight wasn't over, and as long as he had breath, he wouldn't let it be.